Back on the free agency position previews today. It's time for the small forwards. Alex Golden from Setting the Pace is going to join us. We're going to break down all the available free agent small forwards, who the Pacers could get, could not get, who they should get, what this pursuit should be like, and why wings are so important. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're back on the positional preview grind, looking at small forwards. Pacers don't have a lot of depth here, and every team needs basically as many of these as possible in the modern NBA. The NBA Finals features teams that are just churning out wings constantly in this series. It's been very important for them in terms of adjustments in play style, and the Pacers desperately need more of them. Alex Golden from Setting the Pace and I get into everything about the Pacers' potential pursuit of some small forwards this summer. We go through the entire list of important players who the Pacers could and couldn't get, who's important on their quest for defense, and much more. And yes, this intro has the travel mic. I am in New York City, but Alex and I recorded this before I left, so the audio quality and video quality will be awesome. Let's just get right to it. Wings, whatever you need, the Pacers need it too. It's Wings Day. It's Small Forwards Day as we look ahead of free agency here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. And joining me from a different Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace, it's Alex Golden. Alex, all summer, this has been the talk, wings and fours. Excited to dive into this position group with you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Pacers have needed wings for quite a while now, so there's plenty of options to talk about for sure. I know we got a long list here to look at, but speaking of wings, though, I'm going to go a little bit off topic here real quick to start the pod.
Ooh.
Are you bone in or boneless?
Oh, bone in. What?
Okay, that's what I want to make sure, because I know we got some different people out there, shout out Mark Schindler, that don't like bone in wings, but I feel like, that's the best kind of wing that there is.
I do like when my food tastes better than when my food tastes worse. Yes, that is how I would answer that question.
Oh, man.
Everybody's argument for boneless is mess. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm eating. I have a napkin in my hand. I don't care. I could clean up. It's not very. It's not like it's a silly argument to me.
It
But yes, the NBA version of wings, critically important. Pacers have learned the easy way and the hard way about that, because their best team in the last 4 years had great wing play from TJ Warren and specialist play from Doug McDermott. And then TJ got hurt, and then Doug McDermott left, and all of a sudden they're counting on young guys or inconsistent guys or too small guys or not actually wings on the wing. Jakar Sampson was playing the four kind of a lot for that team. Like, they just have needed dudes in these spots for forever.
Mm-hmm.
And you go into next year, and Matherin's hinting on ESPN2. Maybe he'll start at the 3, but he's probably more 2 than 3. And Aaron Nesmith's good, but what's the perfect amount of minutes for him? And Chris Duarte, what even is his future after a down year? And is Jordan Nwora a 3? I wouldn't say so. Like, you just can never get enough wings. Look no further than the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets, who it seems like has an endless reservoir of them in their rotation in the NBA Finals. So I don't feel like I need to explain this, but I always start every positional preview with, why would the Pacers sign somebody at that position? Well, because currently they have little proven talent. Nesmith's year was very solid. I don't want to belittle that. I think he should be in the rotation next year. But you can always have more wings. There's always room to play them. The way the Pacers play, they could play 2, 3, and 4, as we saw last year. You can just, quite frankly, never get enough of them, and the Pacers do not even have close to enough of them. So that's why this spot and the 4, which will come later this week, are so valuable to this team.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the best players in the league, most of them are wings too. Like, we obviously have centers that are great, don't get me wrong, with Joel and Nikola and Giannis. He can just play every position, it feels like. But wings are like the dominant position in the league that you really want one of those to be really good, like Jimmy Butler, someone like that. So Ben Matherin as a wing, I think that that's what Chad Buchanan said that he was. He said he's not a combo guard because his ball handling has to be better, but they view him more as a 2-3 type of player. So I can kind of see that. He did play the 3 quite a bit this year, especially with them going a little bit smaller, specifically with Nembhard in the starting lineup next to Tyrese. So, Yeah, I mean, I guess last year Buddy Hield even played 3 quite a bit. So it's one of those things where it's like positionless basketball. It's hard to just like when you think about positions, you kind of overthink like what's a small forward versus a power forward. Yeah, we're not really worried about that because a lot of these guys in this list here can play either position. So I just think that personally for the Pacers, they got to address this because I think it's going to significantly impact their defense as well if they can get just some more size on the court.
Yeah, and defensively is kind of like if you have to define positions, because again, I use the SPO track lists for these because then I don't overlap talk about the same guy for two different positions. But in general, I kind of ascribed to the theory of you are what you guard. And the reason that's critical for small forwards or this discussion is like everybody the Pacers trotted out who wasn't Indo Shea Brissett last year was like 6'5" or shorter or a center. And so there was just this giant gap of height that they couldn't cover effectively for one reason or another. And small forwards can do any number of things. But even if you do say, okay, positionless basketball is a thing, and anybody who's not on the ball all the time, but's on the perimeter, that's a wing or that's a hybrid forward, whatever. Like, yeah, okay, that's true. But they still need guys who can guard those guys to be out there in that position and in that role. And like Terry, like Keelan Martin was in the rotation at this spot. They needed depth at it so much. Like Terry Taylor was playing, he was starting for them to start last year. This is not to dump on those guys. Like they're fine players. They're just on the fringe of the NBA. The Pacers haven't had a ton of serious talent there, and it's been kind of a hindrance for them these last couple of years.
It really has. I mean, the TJ Warren injury really put this team back quite a bit at that position. Trying to pigeonhole Karis LeVert into that was not great. And we know that Karis LeVert is obviously a turnstile on defense. So the Pacers obviously got to address this. If Ben Mathurin's going to be their starting 3, he's going to have to take a significant jump defensively. That's kind of the focus of this team is internal growth. But I think that through the draft, potentially, and through free agency, they could add some players that could help with this team and fill out that wing position. Obviously, we're not talking trades, but they could do that as well.
Yeah.
But they got, like Kevin Pritchard said, optionality, $27 million roughly around that this offseason. So they have the money to go out and buy some help.
Yeah, the thing is, sometimes with these positional free agency previews, I'm like, okay, if they draft a guy here, they don't need somebody as much, or if they trade for somebody here, they obviously don't need somebody as much. But in this case, and I'll say the same thing on the Fours episode, even if they draft a 3 or trade for a 3, they still need more 3s. Like you should still probably put some resources into this spot or the forward spots in general, bonus points if they can play both. But that's been the case for them for years now. And I think Neesmith was a good swing for that reason. And there was some hope or thought that Duarte could do it, and maybe he can. But, they still, especially just if they're trying, and I shouldn't say if because they've said it on the record, they want to make the playoffs next year. Like you need guys at this spot, right? You can't coast by and only getting 1 or 2, maybe not even enough. So, it's not even like external stuff like a draft night trade or an actual draftee playing the 3, although man, a lot of the top 7, 8, 9 commonly mocked guys, I'd say, are more 4 or 2. But either way, that they just need more. So it's not even like that's a hindrance or an overlap. And you can play if you're a 3 who can do stuff that makes you a starter level player, you can play with another 3, right? Like you just can. So there's almost like an unlimited number I would go to with how many you need at this spot.
Yeah, and I will say this too. It feels like the Pacers have not really addressed this, but I think if you go back just 2 years ago, they did bring in Torrey Craig in free agency.
I love that signing at the time.
Yeah, and it made a lot of sense because Torrey Craig is a good defender. And then you were hoping TJ Warren would get healthy, so you feel like you kind of have yourself set there. And then obviously with the rebuild and everything they did that year by tearing it down, you end up trading Torrey Craig back to the Phoenix Suns, which made a lot of sense for him. You get a young power forward center type player in Jalen Smith. And once again, you're loaded up on bigs and guards, and you're in this spot now where you're trying to find wings, and you're kind of, pigeonholing that with different players like, Aaron Neesmith, who ended up starting some of the year. And then obviously, like we said, Buddy Hield. So personally for me, I feel like the Pacers know what they have to address. They've talked about it openly. They talked about openly going after certain players in the trade market that could fill this position. So, yeah, they got to start winning now. I think that's interesting because they're still only really in year 1 of the rebuild last year. But at the same time, they were so good when they were healthy that you got to kind of make Tyrese feel like, hey, we're going in the right direction. You don't want to have Tyrese stuck on a rebuilding team for the next 3 to 4 years. So I think finding a wing makes sense. And I don't know if there's a wing on this group of small forwards that makes perfect sense with this team as a starter. I think there's maybe one or two, but I know we're going to get to that a little bit later. But overall, I think that the best option for them, probably where they're going to be able to financially kind of absorb a contract maybe differently, would be via trade instead of spending a lot of money on free agents.
Yeah, if they really want to take a jump, I mean, you could just trade for a good player, because the top of this group, as we'll get to, is
It's okay.
There's like some of the best names are good players, and I'm just like not a personal fan of, which doesn't matter at all to the basketball part of this. But yeah, for certainly true, and they have the cap space to make lopsided trades. And there might be some salary dumpage going on as the new CBA sort of kicks in the league in general. So there's going to be fascinating ways to all get around this and see what goes on. But given the Pacers' space and their ability to clear more, not really easily, but somewhat easily, I think that it's worth exploring the top of this group. Hey guys, short little break here so I can talk to you about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So, Alex, looking at this, thankfully, Spotrac is so kind and tiers them for us. It's not a perfect science, but they have an all-star tier, a starter tier, a rotation tier, and a fringe tier. And I think fringe is such a kind word for some of these guys. But there's only 1-3 in the all-star tier, multi-time all-star for the Bucks. Former Fort Wayne Mad Ant, not because he was with the Pacers, because he was with the Pistons, but still former Fort Wayne Mad Ant, and that's Chris Middleton, who might not even be a free agent. He has a player option this summer. By some reporting, was involved in coaching meetings for the Bucks, which points to many indications that he will be back. I don't think you make a big head coaching change to also make roster changes. But if the Bucks for some reason decide they don't want Chris Middleton back, do you view that as a fit with the Pacers at all? Because to me, just high level, yeah, talent-wise, great fit. But if he's just totally signable, I feel like a long-term deal for him, especially at his age, isn't the perfect mix, even though his talent is fantastic.
Yeah, the talent's there, but the fit long-term is not for me. I think 32 years old, probably when the season starts, had a history of injuries. He's looking to win now. The Pacers, I don't know if they're there yet. Obviously, they want to win, get to the playoffs, but they're not anywhere close to where Milwaukee's at right now with their roster. So, it's a long shot for them to get to that level. So I think while Chris Middleton, his play style fits, I don't think the actual player Chris Middleton does. So, everybody was talking about Buddy Hield being too old for this Pacers team. Well, Chris Middleton's even older. So really good player, and I think he'd be a welcomed addition. But at $35 million that he's making this year, I just don't see the Pacers being able to really afford that right now unless they did a sign and trade. So that would have to be another hurdle to jump. So for me personally, I just think the money is just I'm not going to invest that much money in a guy that's on the latter part of his career.
He's a wonderfully good player and would fit well with how they play and what they need. Like, he can defend. He's 6'7". He's a good shooter from three in the last bunch of seasons outside of this one where he was hurt and wasn't even starting games, 37+% every year. He's good. He would fit what they need. The contract part of it is why it's confusing. To me, the dream scenario for the Pacers would be that he opts in, but the Bucks still decide to move on for some reason. That doesn't make any sense. It's something that would happen. But for the Pacers, that'd be awesome, because then they can roll the space over. They could re-sign him for cheaper next year when he's 32. That would be, I think, what is their dream. But that's just not. I mean, why would Chris Middleton do that? Why would the Bucks do that? I could go on and on about why that's not possible. But that'd be the best for them. And in general, kind of for a team that's still in flux, shorter deals make some sense to me in general. So the fact that that player option is a part of this is a thing. So yeah, I mean, I suppose if somehow 2 or 3 year deal Chris Middleton were available, then sure, but that's not a thing that guys at 32 who are 3-time All-Stars typically pursue. And again, the Bucks won a championship with him on the team very recently. They have no reason to let him go. As good as a fit as I think he'd be as a player, there's a lot of hurdles that make this not perfect, especially because there's a chance he's just not even a free agent 3 weeks from now if he opts in anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I think he'd be kind of crazy to opt out of his player option. I mean, that's just my personal
He'd
opinion.
have to have a bad year, a really bad year for that not to be the right choice, I think.
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see what he does, but I think it's like 99% sure he goes back to Milwaukee.
Yep.
I would be stunned if he didn't.
I can't believe that I am just now saying this. For those of you listening, because you're listening 4 days after we're recording this, Chris Paul's getting released. We just found that out as we're talking, Alex. That's pretty crazy.
Is he
he's
really?
Not a small, yeah, Chris Hayes just put it out there.
Oh my
not
goodness.
a Pacers fit or a small forward, but that my gut right now, without reading any reporting on it, is that the Suns will just bring him back on a cheaper deal, I guess. But I don't know why this gets out there now. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Wow.
Clippers be ringing. That would be awesome too. Staying on the Pacers top. I want to talk about that now, but I can't. Pacers topic. Staying on topic. That is pretty crazy. The starter tier is interesting. There's one of my least favorite players to watch this year, but he's good. I won't say which guy it is, but there's some interesting names in that. Kyle Kuzma's kind of more of a 4, but his offensive talent's really good. I'm not the biggest fan of his game in general. Defensively would not boost the Pacers in the way that they've talked about wanting to improve their team. He's probably the second best guy on this list. And then there's a great fit right after him in Cam Johnson, who would be just like not quite a slam dunk, but pretty dang close, but is a restricted free agent. And there's no reason for the Nets to let him get away. So like the best of the best in this class, it's just like, yeah, they'd all fit really well in the Pacers, but it's just kind of unreasonable to think there's a path to the Pacers getting them unless they go all out for Kuzma. But given what the Wizards have to do to keep him with his bird rights, that also seems unreasonable at the price it will take. So no, the top 3 threes, air quotes, because of Kuzma, don't seem like they'll be Pacers, even though they would all be pretty good on the core fits.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because there was a report that came out over the last couple of days that talked about the Wizards might be going into a rebuild with their new GM. So does that make Kuzma more expendable for them? I think that's possible.
If they do that, they had the worst February trade deadline in NBA history.
Well, to be fair, the new GM was not there. So
yeah, but still, you can't just lose that.
It's the Wizards, man. I mean, they always do.
I know
stuff.
too well about the Wizards.
I know. I know you do. I will say that
they're higher. So
I will say that the 2020 version of Kyle Kuzma that we saw in the bubble, we did see probably the best version of him, I think. Now, obviously, last year he defended well, and I think that in Washington it probably was just a little bit different. He was more of a scorer, trying to make a name for himself. For me personally, if the Pacers brought him in, I think that Rick Carlisle is one of those coaches that's going to demand defense out of him. So you're probably going to get a better, more inspired Kyle Kuzma. So I actually wouldn't hate the Kuzma fit because I do think that offensively he can put the ball in the hoop, and he's a good shooter. And yeah, he does high volume shooter for like 27 points on 27 shots. I always remember that game against the Pacers. Like, okay, he's very streaky, I guess you could say. But I like Kuzma as a player. I definitely think he's elevated a little bit more because of his time with the Lakers and obviously being covered a lot. But outside of his crazy fashion, I'm not paying him 25 plus million like I'm sure he's wanting. So
quick question, if you don't mind. Do you know how many years of Kyle Kuzma's career his true shooting percentage has been at least 55%?
No, I have no idea.
Okay. The answer is 0. Never.
Yeah, I kind of figured, but it's just one of those things. Like I think that if he was in a role next to a guy like Tyrese is going to feed him the basketball, defensive-minded center in Miles, I could see the fit working. But I always come back to the price. That's my biggest thing.
He's gonna be overpaid.
Yeah, he's just gonna get way too overpaid, and that's where it kind of stops. And I know the play you're talking about, one of the starters that you don't like watching that much. And I think it's kind of interesting that his team basically publicly called him out and said they weren't bringing him back. Unless that was
that's actually not it, but that's okay. We'll bring him up.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I think he's good. Yeah. The last 4 guys who are starters, I view them in a tier below Kuzma and Cam, which is why I'm saying them in a separate breath of air, are Dylan Brooks, who you just alluded to.
Yes.
Special defender. I mean, I just dumped on Kuzma's efficiency. Atrocious offensive player this past season. Has had success before that, but really not good this past year. Kelly Oubre, who had another also resurgent season with Charlotte. Who the hell knows what the Hornets are going to do this summer? If they draft Brandon Miller, it seems like one of PJ Washington or Oubre or some of their many forwards would be less available. Jay Crowder, who having him in the starter tier is adorable. He was terrible for the Bucks last year. And Herb Jones, who I have no idea why the Pelicans would let him get away. They also have a team option. They can decline and send him to restricted free agency or just pick him up and keep him. I don't even think he's going to be a free agent, even though he would be a fantastic fit.
That's the perfect fit right here. Out of all the names you said, Herb
Excellent.
Jones, but no chance he's going to be available. Cam Johnson, once again, I'm sorry I kind of skipped over him, but
that's okay.
I think out of all the starter level players you listed, he's the best fit. And
agreed. Very good fit.
I think he would actually fit in perfectly with this team. You wouldn't have to worry about the effort. I think you would buy in. He's always been in this spot where he's kind of had to like earn his minutes in a sense with Phoenix, became the starter for Jay Crowder. That's what kind of started that whole spiral down there in Phoenix before they made the Durant trade. But I just feel like the injury that he had last year, it really sucked for him because he was playing really good basketball at the beginning of the season. I think Brooklyn would be stupid not to bring him back because I think he was a big piece of that trade that they did to get Mikal Bridges and him back. So I wonder if he's worth 25 to 30 million a year. I feel like that's once again a bit of an overpay, but that's kind of what free agency is, especially with how little we see with star players hitting free agency. A lot of times now it feels like you're seeing guys, re-sign or get traded and then, extend with that team and that kind of stuff. So you're not seeing the big name free agents like we once saw. It feels like that anyway.
One more break here, guys, so I can talk to you about FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs and finals because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You got to love their great promotions every day over on FanDuel, as well as their safe and secure app that lets you get paid your winnings instantly. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Just in general, from a free agency perspective, like I brought this up when I did an episode breaking down the Pacers cap situation. In 4 seasons, the salary cap will be $200 million. Okay, it'll be like 1 million short. But like I think if you're a starter level player, that's 20 million a year minimum, like done, no doubt. Okay. And so if you're, that's what I think. Now that's the case, because 4 for 80 will look amazing in 4 seasons, right? Like it'll just look so good. So yeah, if that's what it takes for Cam Johnson, I think the Pacers should try, and I think the Nets should match immediately because they don't have their own picks for all of time, it feels like, and should just try, I guess, to be decent and not help the Rockets. But yeah, it's they are very confusing to me just because of how they're set up and how much shock value is involved in their last season. But either way, like of the rest of the crew, Dillon Brooks would actually fit. I mean, I don't think the Pacers would do it, but he would actually fit.
Oh,
Jay Crowder, terrible. I'm not even going to talk about that anymore. And Oubre would actually I don't
know.
Maybe?
I'm not sold on Oubre.
I never have been sold on Oubre, but he did show some stuff last year. He's still not a good shooter, but like 20 points per game, athletic scoring types, like that's Kuzma-like, basically. I mean, he's worse than Kuzma, but he's fine. He's had more seasons with 55% true shooting than Kyle Kuzma. That's for dang sure. But I don't think Kelly Oubre should be someone they're like tripping all over themselves to sign, but he's a solid backup plan. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's. I don't really know if I consider him a starter level player though.
I don't think I do. I don't think.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have Aaron Nesmith start than him with this Pacers team. I think it's very close.
That depends who my 4 starter is, I think.
Well, that matters too. But I'm saying if I had to pick between the two of them for like the 3 spot potentially, I don't know. I don't feel like they're that far off.
Here's the thing though, Oubre's usage this past season was insane because LaMelo was hurt all year. Like I wonder if reeled in a little bit, if he could be more effective, like his Wizards usage, but what the player he is now, but I don't know if he'll actually want that at this stage of his career. Either way,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say by the last swath of players is outside of that top 3 who's really good but unlikely to move situations, the talent at this spot on the market is not that strong.
Mm-mm. I agree. I mean, and like you said, Dylan Brooks would actually make sense defensively, helping the Pacers get better. But he's too much of a head case. Jaren Jackson Jr. was just talking about him and saying how like him talking to the Lakers, kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of like how people probably felt, especially some of the guys on the team when Lance was talking to LeBron back in 10 years ago, whatever. It's like, do you want to deal with that headache? And I like the upside of Dylan Brooks. Don't get me wrong. Like the stuff that he does well, I really am intrigued by that. But the spontaneous shooting, just the high levels of inconsistency on the offensive end really make me a little bit nervous about bringing him into this team. So, yeah, I know our good friend Rhett Bauer probably is screaming hearing us even talk about Dylan Brooks because he is like 1,000% out on him. So, me mentioning him and you mentioning him right now, I'm sure Rhett's screaming into his phone listening.
I'm sure a lot of people are. Just the fact that I'll be fascinated by what his next deal is and what his team is, just because of how the reports got out about what his future in Memphis is not going to be. I mean, that is as damning as you can get.
It was really bizarre.
That doesn't make sense. Like, even if that is your party line as a team, like, wouldn't you want to like at least give the facade that you could sign and trade him somewhere? Like, at least under any circumstance, like any teams be like, okay, great, good to know. I mean, this is easy.
Well, that's why it made no sense to me. And some people even said, well, it was Dylan Brooks' camp that put that stuff out. And I'm like, well, how does that make sense?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me.
So it's like none of it made sense to me either way. If the team put it out because they're trying to send a message like we're done with your nonsense, and maybe they're trying to bring him back for cheaper, like that's the only thing I could think of. But at this point, I feel like that relationship, that bridge has kind of already been burned. So we'll see where he goes. But I feel like just anytime a team like that diminishes one of their own players, it only hurts their chances to get other free agents as well in the future, because if you do it to one guy, you'll do it to somebody else.
Let's move on to the air quotes realistic targets, because in general, the guys we talked about are all, to the extent that if they were available, realistic. Yeah, the Pacers should have interest in them. They need guys at this position badly, but none of them are perfect fits. So maybe they just bite the bullet on one of those guys. But I think we've laid out good reasons for all of them not being on the Pacers next year for either contractual or basketball reasons, except for Kelly Oubre. I think there's like, okay, you could squint into this, makes sense. Everybody else on Spotrac's list, it's either listed as rotation level or fringe level. So first of all, before we get into non-Pacers free agents, Kendall Brown's on this list. I think they should try to retain him. They loved him last year. They traded stuff to get him. They said they loved him, and they did stuff that proves it, right? It's not just lip service. I was impressed by his athleticism and defense in the G League. He got hurt. Why not explore it again, especially with 3 two-way deals? I mean, unless Kendall Brown doesn't want to be on the Pacers, I feel like they just should bring him back, unless you can give me a good argument against it.
No, I think on a two-way deal, bring him back, especially with the additional two-way deal added to the roster. Let him get a chance to be healthy and see like why you traded up for him in the second round to get him. I mean, that just makes too much sense to me. Don't think I'd be giving him a roster spot at this point. Don't think he's earned that quite yet.
Yeah, KP said that, and I was kind of like, no. I don't think they'll.
No, not right now. They're already pretty tight with their roster spots anyway. So
yeah,
with the additional two-way, like I don't think other teams are going to be breaking the bank to go get Kendall Brown. So hopefully that relationship they've already established, they can kind of bring him back on a two-way, let him prove himself, and hey, if he's awesome next year, then reward him with a contract, right? That's how I view it. I think that at this point, it's just if you like the guy enough, bring him back on a two-way and let him earn that spot.
Exactly. I agree. And, if he can defend in the NBA, hey, great. There's a role for you at some point, but you got to be healthy enough to actually play. In terms of external players or guys that can actually be on the court for the Pacers, there's a couple things you could look at, but I would start with the thing that the Pacers, everybody said, defense. We need defense. We need size. If you can shoot, that's a plus, but then you're probably better than a rotation level player. So of this group, I kind of looked at the defenders first. Funnily enough, a former Pacer, Torrey Craig, kind of a decent fit, although I don't know if they would just immediately turn back to that reunion the second his contract expires with the Suns. Other than that, though, there's not like any amazing defenders in this group. I'm a big fan of Kessler Edwards, but he's a little cheap and not really like this massive upgrade at the spots. TJ Warren, to the extent that he can still play, is an okay defender. Yuta Watanabe was good for the Nets last year, but there's not like any awesome defenders in this group unless you feel like I glossed over somebody too quickly.
No, I mean, I think Najee Marshall, somebody I'm interested in.
He's good.
I feel like with him being on a club option, though, he'll be back in New Orleans. So would be kind of stunned, but they do have a loaded roster. Like who they pick at 14, I just don't know how they're going to have space. Like I just look at that roster. There's so many guys on that team, and it's just like, where are they going to find playing time for these guys? So maybe they let Marshall go per his request. I mean, I just feel like he's a good facilitator, actually, as like a secondary playmaker. Not a good pull-up shooter, but, okay on the catch and shoot. I think he only shot like 30% from three, so that's a little bit problematic. But, especially in college, he was able to guard multiple positions. And I've seen it some in the NBA, but obviously I'm not watching the Pelicans every night, so can't say that I'm fully watching. But he did improve. He started, I think, 20 games this year, something like that. So played 70-plus games and started in about 20 of them and had the most points per game that he's had in his career, like around 9.5. So I feel like he's a guy that could make some sense, especially for cheap. But Watanabe, I mean, that's another name that I'm kind of intrigued by because 44% from three. I know it's just on 2.3 attempts, but that's really good shooting numbers. And if you know anything about the Pacers, they love lefty shooters. I mean, just go back. You got Jalen Rose. You've got Chris Mullin, Sam Perkins, Kareem Rush, Troy Murphy, and CJ Miles. Okay, so like we needed to add to that collection of left-handed snipers. I mean, he shot the ball really well throughout his career. And him being, I think it's kind of tough because he is 6'9". So he could probably play 3 or 4, probably more 4. I think he even played some small ball 5, if I'm not mistaken, for the Nets. So at times I think they had him out there at the 5, or maybe he was playing with Durant. Durant was kind of playing the 5, but to me, he's a guy that at the right price could really be a nice addition for this team because he does fit the offense and defense. And if you look at B-Ball Reference, his nickname, the Chosen One. Come on now. I mean, I've given you every reason why you should be enticed by Yuta Watanabe.
Yeah, look, if he's the best wing you get, you're not like psyched about your summer, but he definitely can play and put together some stuff last year. And it kind of maintained when his team wasn't a bunch of all-stars around him too, which I think is important. And like, look, we're talking about a guy who averaged 6 points a game, but he put the threes in. He showed way more floor game too, which is what I think kind of let him be really effective. His second best assist rate ever. He never turns it over. So he's not like he's probably more perimeter than the typical 6'9" player. But if he even settles in as like the 3-point shooter he was outside of his first season in the league, right? The 3 years between that year and this past year, he was at 37%, and he's 6'9" and cannot make mistakes with the ball in his hands. Like that's kind of what the Pacers need, right? And so he's not. I would have him behind Nesmith, like if he played. But he's good, and he is not old. And amongst this group that we're talking about, he would be a pretty good fit, I think.
Yeah, that's best where I'm at. Like when I was on a Pelicans podcast yesterday, and they were talking about potentially Najee Marshall and some kind of like fake trade for the Pacers. I'm like, look, I said I like Najee Marshall, but where is he getting playing time on this Pacers team? Like that's the only problem with like when you get down at this level, you're kind of just filling in the back end of the roster, and these are guys that if you have injuries, yes, they're nice to have, but they're not going to be a part of your everyday rotation more than likely, especially with all the draft picks they've got and the young talent they're trying to develop already. So it's interesting, but I do just like the versatility of a Watanabe because like that's a nice player to have on your rotation.
Can play the 4 as well. Like you already said that, but like that's going to matter too, because another consideration I would add if you're at this level of player, right? You're going at rotation level guys, not as much starter level guys. And I still think, again, you can never have too many wings, but there becomes a level of talent where you just rather play Chris Duarte, like without a doubt. And so if they're worse than that, they're probably just not even worth the investment to the Pacers at all, because then you have Nesmith and Duarte, who you could already play both of. So I think Utah's above that, but there's not like, I like Lamar Stevens. I don't know why the Cavs will let him go away with his team option, but there's not a ton of guys in this group that are like, oh, this guy should obviously play above, if he's on the team above Chris Duarte, and Duarte was really good his first year. Like he actually, maybe we should go a little longer on him because he's an interesting wrinkle in this discussion in general, just because, where do you kind of fit him into this? If he's on the team next year, you'd like to get him time. He was really good his first year, but at the same time, he really struggled this past year when they set their identity and looked like a better team. And if they add more wings, it's like, where do you find him the time that makes sense? So it's hard for me to kind of figure out where he is unless they just don't get any amazing additions. And then I mean, of this group, I think we've already talked about two. Well, there's one more guy I want to get to, but like the only two guys that I think I would play above him if they were on the Pacers.
Yeah, I think that you have to look at your roster and just be like, before you make any draft pick selections, right? You're starting five. You're probably looking at Tyrese, Nimhard, Ben. We'll just say Neesmith for now, and Miles. And then off the bench, you're looking at McConnell, Buddy. Duarte is probably in that mix. And then, of course, Jordan Moore is there. Am I missing anybody? I feel like I'm missing somebody, but maybe I'm not. O'Shea's a free agent, so you're not sure what's going to happen with him. So, I think that makes sense. Like Duarte is probably your backup three right now.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, you invested a 13th overall pick in him, so yeah, you should be committed to him somewhat. But at the same time, if you feel like it's not going to work based on his inability maybe to guard up in size, up in position, you try to maybe move Buddy and slide Duarte up to the 2, or you maybe try to find a new home for Duarte. But like I said, you're not even including in any of your draft picks. So do those guys kind of push him out of the rotation? I think that could be possible. So yeah, I agree though. I think that if Duarte is still on the roster, you want to get him the minutes because you've already invested the money into him. So don't go out there and get somebody on the same level that is going to really just kind of clog up that position.
Exactly. Like as much as I like Kessler Edwards and he's 6'8" and is smooth and can kind of do a lot of stuff, but not really do anything awesomely. Like I'd rather play Duarte than him.
Yeah.
So then you like if you can get Kessler Edwards, again, he's 6'8" and he's like, 24 years old. I can't even remember. He'd be younger than that. Like, yeah, do it. Okay, you can never have too much depth at the spot, but he wouldn't play to me. He would be a depth piece. The guy we haven't said, let me tell you, pretty good fit to me. If he's actually available, would love to hear his Australian accent every single day. Has had some banger shooting seasons in the past, is a good creator in the past when asked to do it, although injuries might make that a thing of the past because that was not a thing for the Bucks last year. Joe Ingles, not on a long deal. He's old. He's 35, but he's a rotation level dude who can kind of shoot, who can kind of create. He shot 41% from three this past year. I mean, if he wiggles free, if the Bucks, who are going to be dealing with these aprons, can't keep him, I kind of really like that fit with the way the Pacers play.
Yeah, I think he fits okay, but I do worry about the age, being 36 years old. Does he want to come to a young Pacers team, or does he want to try to latch onto a team that's maybe got more of a chance to win a title in the latter days of his career? If he wants to come here, though, I would like the fit, but definitely in the backup role. Playing maybe 15 minutes a night, something along those lines. But he is a good playmaker. He's actually a pretty good defender as well. Just kind of a smart, high basketball IQ kind of guy. But he's definitely lost a step, I would say, since their glory days in Utah. But still a good player. And I think that kind of veteran, like there's a guy that's even further down that I think's lost more of a step. That's Danny Green. Someone like that, if you wanted to replace maybe the George Hill, James Johnson role with like a Danny Green type of guy, someone like that, it could make sense just because you can never have too many wings. And, James Johnson played 5 sometimes last year. So, just having like veteran depth is never a bad thing. But Joe Ingles definitely, I still think, has more left in his game than Danny Green has shown the last couple of years.
Agreed. Danny Green probably has one more year to save it. I think the injury might have him on the outskirts. So I hope I want to do 2 things. One, I want to say I hope that these players we're discussing now illustrate that this is not a good class if you need a small forward. It's just not. So if you're the Pacers, trading might be more tenable if you want some serious talent at this spot. You said that right at the beginning, which I think, as we've gone through the exercise, has proven to be true. Especially though, because if you're going to use a big chunk of cap space, you probably like to use it on a great fitting player. And none of these guys are like the perfect fit. And yeah, the timing might never be right, but I wouldn't imagine any of these guys get more than a 2-year deal with the Pacers. And the last is one of the first 3 we said, which is Middleton, Kuzma, and Johnson. But thing 2, I would like to say is there anyone else that you just like in this fringe group or sub-rotation group that we haven't talked about that you'd like to give some flowers to?
I got love for Terry Taylor. I know we
Oh,
kind
well,
of talked
yeah,
to
for
him,
sure.
but
He's not a 3. I hate that he's on this part of the list. I know you know that.
I agree. He's on here, so I'm gonna mention him. Maybe one other player that I'll give some love to just because he had a big shot last year is Matt Ryan. I mean, Indiana could
right.
always use Matt Ryan on their roster. I mean, we saw how well that worked out for the Colts, so why not bring him in here? But other than that, I don't really think there's anybody else that is jumping off the page to me. Even some of these like Keon Ellis and Admiral Schofield guys that I was kind of intrigued by when they were coming into the draft, I would say, it's just not worth the time to me.
Yeah, not like I don't think anyone is left who's into Kevin Knox anymore. Is there anybody left?
Not me.
Yeah, right. We're kind of running low, scraping the barrel down here. I like Darius Days in the draft, but he's kind of like a two-way guy right now. Dylan Windler, if he becomes available, I don't know why he's on this list because he's not going to be a free agent. Oh, yes, he is going to be a free agent because he missed the whole year of his career, didn't he? Never mind. Yeah, okay. Indie kid. There you go. He can shoot it. What about that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, why not?
Fifth wing.
Fifth wing, 15th guy on the roster, come in and knock a 3 down in garbage time. Hey, why not? Make all the Windler fans happy.
A whole year. That explains a lot about why I was confused.
Man.
I was like, wait, he's only been in the league 3 years. Yeah, it's not a great class at this spot, and there's not like any like, oh, this young guy could pop. Obvious talent. So either it's going to be the top of it or they're going to be signing somebody who's like right around the level of some of the wings that they already have. Do you have any other thoughts on this before we get the people out of here?
No, I would just say for everybody listening, in case you're wondering, Lance Stevenson is not on any of these lists. I've already gone through and checked, so you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I mean, I would love to hear where Tony would have Lance ranked out of these 36 players.
There's 36 on here?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and count how many I would have him above.
I'm just glad it's not 37 because that's what I was waiting for.
Okay, every guy who's labeled rotation, at least on this, I would have above him for sure.
Okay.
I can go through. Oh, I didn't even realize there was a number before them. I'm dumb. I'm like, did you really count all 36? The top 20, I'd for sure have above him.
Okay.
The rest of the guys are just names. I mean, it's just
yeah. So I mean, if you want Lance back, hey, if you're interested in bringing Dylan Windler off the bench as a 15th guy, why not Lance, right? I'm just kidding.
The Puerto Rico experience, man. I actually didn't watch any of those games. I need to see how those went.
It was very short-lived. I would love to know what happened, but
I know I didn't. I think there's only 2 games or something.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, thank you for the time. Hope you guys have enjoyed this series. We'll do another one on Power Forwards later this week. Where can people follow you and your work and voice covering this Pacers team?
Yeah, if you're interested in checking out our work, we're at Setting the Pace 3 on Twitter and at Pacers Talk on Instagram. You can follow me for all of my random tweets at Alex Golden NBA. And Tony, you can now officially make fun of me because I am a buyer of Twitter Blue. So I've got my blue check mark finally.
I didn't know how you got it. I can't make fun of anybody if I don't know how they got it.
It's okay. I bought it just because I like having the ability to edit tweets and tweet longer stuff just a little bit. And so I went ahead and plunged forward and bought it. It's $11 though a month, a little bit crazy, but yeah, I'm not gonna do the paid.
Put out one bonus pot a month; it pays for itself, right? There you go.
Right? Yeah, there you go. I mean, hey, we do enough podcasts over at Setting the Pace, so yeah. But always a good time coming on, Tony. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this is a big position. I really wanted to talk about it. Ethan Krieger will be our guest for our Power Forwards episode. Some interesting 4s, and man, the Pacers need them. As Alex and I are talking, they just worked out 2 potential 4s in Jarris Walker and Taylor Hendricks today. So going to be really interesting to see how the rest of this summer goes for the Pacers. I'm pre-recording a lot of stuff because I'm probably about to go on a trip. So no idea what's coming specifically tomorrow. So stay tuned. It'll either be something draft related or free agency related that you won't want to miss. Thank you guys a ton for listening. See you soon.